Hey everyone, welcome back. It's Lucid, and we've got a national overview for Middle-Age Asphodel. Asphodel is a nation of vines and forest creatures and death and rebirth. And it got a nice kind of rebirth in Dominion 6, where a lot of the things in it were changed. It's impacted by a lot of other kind of peripheral changes, like the scales changes in Dominion 6. So it plays a lot differently, and I think it's actually pretty flexible. I think you can play it in multiple different ways. So we're going to have a fun time going through the national overview for them. The reason I'm doing a national overview for Middle-Age Asphodel is because I intend to play them in a single-player game. And I'm going to try this single-player game that we're in is going to be a kind of high-effort, long-form single-player game. And I really just want to see, after all the changes that have been put into Dominion 6 and a lot of the mods that have been done, can we make the single-player experience really fun and engaging? Illwinter's clearly done a lot already, but, you know, it's kind of like the vets of the game have to really try it out and be like, okay, you know, like this is fun or it's not fun. I don't know. So it's kind of going to be an experiment. We're going to try to do turns really well and do them slow and think through them. I'm going to do higher production value, so I'm like pausing while I'm recording it, so you don't just see me sitting there like staring blankly at the screen. So it should be more fun to watch and all these things. Anyway, we'll get back to the national overview. So this is basically so the Pan Nation, Pangaea, which exists in early age, comes to middle age. There is a middle age Pangaea, which has a lot of blood magic, and, well, you know, a decent amount. And I think maybe slightly better armored troops, but otherwise it's pretty similar to early age Pangaea. But Asphodel is kind of like a splinter faction, and they get just a little too curious about death magic. So yeah, it's a nation that has pop kill. So what does that mean? It means every point of dominion you have in any province will cause 1% population per candle. Population loss. So 10 candles in a province, you lose 10% a turn. That's a lot. That'll take you to zero pretty quickly. However, you can also have very few candles in a province and have very minimal pop loss. Unlike a lot of other pop kill nations, you actually have things you can recruit. So you could it's kind of like, if you want to, you can kind of be Pangaea. You don't really have to be a pop kill nation. But you get pretty good free spawn as the pop kill. Well, not really. Your free spawn you get is high mix. You have some free spawn that's pretty much absolute garbage. Some of the worst free spawn in the game in terms of quality, but you get a lot of it. But some of the free spawn you get is really good. Like, I'll show you some of it. We've got a little test game here. So I probably should have a better thing pulled up. I think the best free spawn you get are these carrion behemoths. They're pretty rare. You don't get a ton of them, but they're monstrous. The attacks aren't amazing. Yeah, they have a pretty high damage tusk, but they trample, and they're inanimate with a ton of hit points. They just ruin things. They also have a fear aura. They're really nice. They tend to die pretty quickly, unfortunately, because their protection isn't amazing. They have really bad defense, and because they trample, they just kind of run into the enemy. But if the enemy's not super dense, they're really good. They're very killy, and that's something you often struggle with this nation. We get a couple flavors of Sacreds. These were in Dominions 5. These are the Sagittarian carcasses, and they're basically like undead centaur archers. However, they were changed in Dominion 6 so that they have carrion bows now, so that people you hit get infected with a carrion seed. And if they die, it doesn't have to be from this arrow or from the centaur. If they die in general, once they've been infected, they get brought back to life as a mannequin. So that's pretty cool. And the type of mannequin you get depends on the type of thing you kill. So you kill a really big thing, you can get a giant mannequin, like a size 9 thing. You kill a medium one, you get a mannequin ogre. Kill a small one, you get like just tiny little mannequin. Anyway, there's quite a few different flavors. I'm not even sure I found them all. But they're sacred, so they can take your bless. And then you get these guys, the Carrion Furies, and they have a big skull club that does a tremendous amount of magic damage, two-handed magic damage. And then they're a little bit like the Lion Warrior with an additional effect on damage where they hurt your fatigue. And then that's in addition to the Sleep Vines. The difference between the Sleep Vines attack, which also does fatigue damage, is this is MR negates, so magic resistance negates. This is not, although really high size will negate some of the damage here. And then they have a Gore attack. They also have Berserk. They've got Berserker 5. So these guys are very tough. Very tough. You don't get a ton of them. You get about twice as many of the Centaur Sagittarian carcasses as you do these. And there's some circumstances where you only get these and you don't get these. We'll talk about that. There's a bunch of other different flavors of mannequins. These are kind of the normal ones right here. They have a Sleep Vine. We should talk about these because pretty much all of your mannequins get them. They do fatigue damage. While it's one weapon, it has 3 attacks. This is good in that it's very likely to fatigue people out. It's bad if they have Fire Shield. If they have Fire Shield, this tends to happen first when they attack. So before they even get a chance to hit you with the claw, they just insta-kill themselves with 3 Sleep Vine attacks into Fire Shield. It's pretty funny. So yeah, they don't like attacking fire elementals. But yeah, they can do a fair amount of fatigue damage. It is MR negates though. This also doesn't work against undead, or inanimate undead, like Long Dead. So that's something to keep in mind. Otherwise, their stats aren't really anything to write home about. They don't have protection. They have pretty bad attack and defense. The strength, not really amazing. The claw attack is pretty poor damage. So these are reasonably easy to thug against too, if you can mitigate the fatigue damage here from Sleep Vines, or if you just put on a charcoal shield. But yeah, there's a ton of flavors. There's horses, there's harpies, there's bears. The bears are also pretty tough. They've got a pretty high damage claw attack. And there's minotaurs that are pretty good. These have a claw and a gore attack, so they're one of your more killy varieties. But you can see you mostly get kind of garbage chaff. Yeah. So anyway, that's the free spawn. We're going to talk a lot. I've done a fair amount of testing for the free spawn rates and how all those things work. So we'll talk about that at some length. So we're going to go back to the national overview here. Yeah. So you get free spawn from having Dominion in provinces, but that Dominion also causes pop kill. So that's not good. The quality and type of free spawn you get depends on how many. So it depends on, first of all, what type of province it's in. Forest provinces give much higher quality free spawn. Also, the Dominion is going to determine how much free spawn you get. If you have really high Dominion, you get a lot of free spawn. If you have very low, you get very little. Growth is going to affect how much free spawn you get as well. This has a very limited effect. We're going to go through some of the testing numbers, but the growth has a very limited effect on the quantity of free spawn you get. However, growth 4 and 5 will turn a province into forest, and forest has a major effect on the quality of the free spawn you get. So just the fact you can turn things into forest is actually really important for how this nation plays, because now it can get a lot better access to its high quality free spawn. And if we were going back and looking at it, some of your free spawn is garbage and it's almost worth nothing. It's very easy to kill in mass. And other things are actually really tough. So you really do want the tough stuff. And the garbage stuff is a little bit whatever. It's still useful. You can knock down fort walls, hold up fort walls a little bit, raid with it and whatnot. But they don't do very well in pitched combat. And then magic is going to have a very significant impact on the quality of the free spawn you get. So the magic scale is pretty important. One of the changes from Dominions 5 to Dominion 6 is instead of scales fluctuating between -3 and +3, they now fluctuate between -5 and +5. So it potentially allows for you to have more dramatic impacts of these scales on your free spawn rates. So that can be pretty important. And we also have the terraforming thing from growth 4 turning things into forest. That's another, of course, major effect, just to state it again. The other thing that's important is, like Satis, undead priests can reanimate Carrion. So any undead priest, now most of the things you recruit and turn into undead in various ways, or you can summon undead priests. Those, I think, also have reanimation built into the chassis, if memory serves. But any undead priest, I believe, so you could get you could make a prophet out of a Mound King, and he would be able to reanimate. But they will reanimate Carrion. And we're going to talk about the quantity and type of Carrion you get both from the Dominion reanimation and from the Priest reanimation, because they're a little different. Yeah. There's some other things about Dominion too, which is that your temples are going to give you nature gems. So that's pretty important. And temples are pretty cheap in forests. So you get half-price temples and half-price labs in forests. But your temples will give you extra nature gems. You get 1 nature gem for every temple you have that's capped out at your Dominion strength. So if you have Dominion strength 5 and you build 4 temples, you get 4 gems. If you have Dominion strength 5 and you build 8 temples, you get 5 gems, because that's your Dominion strength. So anyway, that's an important mechanic. And then you also get a fair amount of foreign recruit stuff in forests. If you build a lab and a temple in a forest, you can make these centaur mages, and you can get, you can't get centaur warriors, but I think you can get everything on this side. You can get the centaurides, so these bowmen, who aren't really that amazing, but, you know, if you just need bodies and you're looking for places to spend gold, they're fine. The centaur warriors you get from forted provinces are significantly better. Yeah, so that's a kind of super high level overview of the nation itself. And the paths on the nation are a little bit different too. It's primarily nature and death, which you can see here on the Panapostate. You also get water and earth, and you also get, on the dryads, you get glamour. So all of them will have at least 1 glamour, but they can have 2 potentially on the dryad hag. So those are the paths you get access to on the nation. All right, so we'll go through and talk about all the units, and then I think after that we're going to go pull up the free spawn tables that I've made. So on to talking about the units. We'll do commanders first. So the Panapostate, this is a recruit anywhere mage. So you get this big boy in any fort. It can potentially be a death 2 or a nature 4. I mean, a death 3 or a nature 4. And those are very high level mages. So death 3s are super useful. You throw a skull staff on them, boom, you can cast all of the big death spells: rigor mortis, darkness, life after death. The nature mages, pretty much every single one can cast a lot of high level nature spells, but you take the nature randoms and you throw a thistle mace on them, and they can cast basically every nature spell in the game, except for like maybe beast mastery. So that's pretty cheap. You're going to have a lot of nature 4s. So casting nature magic is not a problem. Yeah, these guys are really good. They can Twiceborn, and their Twiceborn form is one of the national summons. They turn into a Carrion Lord. They are not sacred. However, if you do Twiceborn them, the chassis they turn into is sacred. So they pick up sacred if you Twiceborn them. They're very good for that. In the Twiceborn form especially, they're very, very hard thugs, like super combatant tier thugs almost. So they are very, very strong. They can do a tremendous amount of regeneration. It's really cool. The other thing I'll say too, I've got one beef with the mannequins, which is, and it doesn't make any sense to me, I've said it before, but they shouldn't be inanimate. You look at the tag for inanimate, it says inanimate beings are dead things animated by strong magics. They lack life force and are unaffected by certain spells. If you look at it, they're not. They are animate. They are dead, right? But there's a lot of dead things that are not inanimate. Like whites are a good example. And they are animated by magic, kind of, but they're also reanimated, and it says it right here, reanimated by living vines and roots, not magic, And there's magic involved, certainly. But they shouldn't have this tag. And this ends up meaning you can't cast mass regenerate. It's a kind of weird thing. Okay, so we're going to take I'm going to go on a little detour here as we talk about something. So there's a spell. So this is a Holy 3. This is a hero you get. And there's a spell you can cast in Holy called Carrion Growth. And this is a way that you can get regen spread over all of your little mannequins, right? It's MR negates easily. So they have to... You basically want to either cast this a ton, or you can put pin gear on this and cast it a ton, and you can get regen, basically mass regen, put on all of your little undead monkeys. And it's like, great, okay, we have this national spell. The problem is there's not an easy way to cast it. You have to either have a communion, or you have to get a Carrion Lord, which is a expensive summon, and then make them your prophet, and then you can only have one of them cast it. It's kind of strange that, like, this is, and there's the regrowth spell, which is a small area of effect version you can cast, but it's kind of weird that, like, this is a national spell. It's very hard to cast. Meanwhile, you're a nature nation, right? And one of the things nature mages do really well is they can cast mass regen. I don't know if I have it researched here, but let me pull it up. Mass regen, right? Army regeneration, as it's called. But it doesn't affect inanimate beings, which makes sense for this to not affect inanimate beings. But so basically, like, the thing this nation's supposed to do, in a way, like, is these things, they have a national spell just so these guys can regenerate, but they can't cast it. And meanwhile, because of this tag, they can't access the normal regeneration. What I think would be cool is we get rid of this inanimate tag and they can be affected by both. And then it's, like, very special if you figure out how to get the national thing put on. Hard to do, cool. But you can also do the normal regen. Anyway, that's my little rabbit trail diatribe. We could make a mod pretty easily and take this out. This is totally moddable, but it says right here, reanimated by living vines. Living vines. Okay. Here we go. Let's take a look at this. We're talking about troops, and I got on a little segue, because the thing is, once these guys, in this form, they can cast personal regen, which is one of the main things you do with nature thugs and super combatants. When you're in your Carrion Lord form, we'll go ahead and summon one. I'll just show you the form. When you're in your Carrion Lord form, I'll summon the other two as well. Here we go. Carrion Lord. When you're in this form, you can't cast personal regeneration anymore because you're inanimate. So that's a little bit of a bummer, and that's one of the reasons I would like this taken, you know. That said, these guys are still very strong even with this handicap. Certainly they can be killed by players. They're not in any way invincible, but they're very good, what I would like to call hit point tanks. In other words, there's various ways to tank things. You can tank things by just having a ton of protection. People can't damage you. You can tank things by having really high defense. You know, they can't hit you. The other way is you're like, okay, you're going to hit me a lot, and a lot of damage is going to get through because my protection's not great. We're just going to out-regen it. So normally, with most thugs, you're like, okay, we'll just have, like, you know, we'll have a couple regen a turn, and that will take care of any of the occasional chip damage that gets past my other lines of defense. And this guy's like, no, we're going to count on you doing 20 damage a turn to us. You know, like, tremendous amounts of damage coming through, but we'll just heal for, like, 30 damage a turn. And so, therefore, we win. Right? It's a kind of crazy way to play. It doesn't always work. It's pretty risky, but it's very cool. So you can stack regen on these guys, and hit points, like, you take various kinds of enlarge, and before you know it, they're up to 100 hit points with, like, 30 regen. Because I believe the rings of regen still work even though they're inanimate. I think. I actually might need to double check that. But other things work, like reforming flesh works on them. That works on any undead regardless of inanimate. So that's something that picks up. And then, of course, the Bless, the Holy 2 thing that does regrowth, that works on them. So it gives you another 10% regen. Anyhow, yeah. So these guys are very cool because they turn into that. And because they're really good mages in their base form. Just having Death 2 mages are always useful. They can cast Horde of Skeletons. Later in the game, they can cast Disintegrate. Nature's a little less good in the late game, just because you can't cast Charm anymore, which is one of the great nature spells, but now that's hidden in Glamour. So yeah, I love these guys, and you can get them in any fort. The problem is, Asphodel tends to be really poor, and these guys, they like honeying up to somebody with a big fat wallet. So yeah, as you can tell from the 420 gold, they only like the expensive stuff. Next, we have the Dryads. Unlike Pangea, these Dryads are very strong and independent women. They're not trying to seduce anybody to, you know, pay their bill or whatnot. Yeah, they practice gangster magic all on their own, right? So they're into death and shit. These are spooky Dryads. These are more like witches in the woods than, you know, cute little forest creatures. They practice death, nature, and glamour magic. They're still stealthy, but again, they can't seduce. So you can do, like, if you have blood, you can put black hearts on them, try to assassinate. I mean, they're stealthy, but you'd probably want to put that on a apostate. I think the most important thing about them is that they're holy 2. So that gives you access to the regrowth national buff. And they have glamour. They're your only access to glamour. These ones also come with a glamour random they can get, but they can also get earth randoms. So the expensive Dryad Hags and your Panic Apostates are your only ways to get earth on the nation, and water. So both of these can get earth and water. These get the Earth Glamour cross path as well, which I believe there's an item or two you can forge with that. So yeah, these are mostly, I think you get them for glamour and to have Holy 2 to preach or to buff troops. So, by the way, these guys are also Holy 2. The reason you would get the Dryad Hag over the Dryad is because you want some of these cross paths, like, or you want a Glamour 2 mage, right? So you probably are going to want a Glamour 2. I've actually kind of come back and recorded the national overview a few times now. And part of the reason I'm doing it this time is because I've actually made it pretty far into the single player game. And one of the things I am going to learn as you watch the rest of this series is you actually want to get a Glamour 2 and probably empower them to Glamour 3 so that you can forge the Glamour booster and do certain sorts of spells, which we'll talk about. But yeah, anyway, it's an important glamour access. You want them outside searching and stuff. The centaurs, the only real reason I think you want the centaurs, they have kind of lame paths. Like death and nature as your primary paths are kind of just bad. These are not great single path things. You can't even do swarm anymore with nature 1, which was the primary thing you would use nature 1 mages for. So now all you can do is like nature point buffing. These are really bad mages in my opinion. However, they are forward recruit. In any forest with a lab and a temple, you can make these. And so often you're going to be making these in forested labs and temples that don't have forts in them yet. The other thing, speaking of that, is you have a national spell, take a little detour here, called Carrion Fortress. And you can cast this in a forest and it's going to make a fort. And so that's why I was saying, before you have the gems or the paths to cast this, they changed it. It used to be you had to roll a nature 4, and now all of your apostates can cast it. That's actually sick. I'm actually not going to realize that in the coming playthrough and like wait many turns to roll a nature 4, and then I finally cast it. Little did I know I could have cast it the whole time. So that's funny. But yeah. So anyway, you might not have the gems, and you might still have labs and temples. And in my opinion, that's where you're going to make the centaur. Because they're okay research monkeys too. They're reasonably cheap. But honestly, I think I'd rather have a Dryad most of the time. Having the glamour access and also the Holy 2 is pretty important for being able to cast regrowth. Most of the time, in terms of mage power, you really are getting a lot more bang for your buck with the Panic Apostates most of the time. But I think you'll still want to mix. The thing is, in the mix, you really don't want a ton of the centaurs. They can be okay lab rats. But really, in my opinion, you're only going to get them when you just have a lab and templed forest you haven't put a fort in. You have the Minotaur Lord. This guy you could probably make into a little mini thug just because he's got Berserk 5. And then you've got Harpies. These are some of the best scouts in the game, so be thankful you have them. And then you have Satyr Commanders for leading sneaky little raiding squads of Satyrs around. Though your Harpies can also lead small little raiding squads as well. We are a pretty stealthy nation here. The mannequins are not stealthy. At least I don't think any of them are. Yeah. So the mannequins aren't stealthy, but most of your recruitable troops are. Not the Minotaurs, right? So none of the Minotaurs are, but basically everyone else is. You have Harpies who are stealthy. You have Satyrs who are stealthy. This last one, the Satyr Warrior, is not. But then all the Centaurs are stealthy. So these guys can sneak through enemy lands. You have the Black Centaur. This is a bit higher Berserk than the White Centaur. So it gets Berserker 4. Very spooky. It's probably time we talk about something I probably should have said at the beginning, which is that the main problem Asphodel struggles with is, like, on one hand, you want to play Pan. You want to do things that Pangea does, like make a ton of Sacreds, which are really good. Like White Centaur, which are Pangea Sacreds, are really good. You want to make a lot of them, right? And you have Black Centaur, who have really nice redeeming traits. The problem is that if you get any, you need a lot. Like, so Pangea tends to, like, it would be very common for Pangea to run Dom 8, Dom 9, Dom 10, have a lot of candles, a lot of Dom strength, so they can recruit a lot of sacreds. But if you do that, you're going to very, very quickly kill all the population in your capital. And when you have no population in your capital, you can't recruit any troops. So when that all happens, it's like you did a lot of things. Maybe you invested a lot in a bless for your Black Centaur. Well, now you can't use it anymore. So that's kind of like the conflict that Asphodel's had in the past. It's like, okay, you lean into the Black Centaur. Well, you can't make them after like turn 20. So that's a kind of weird thing. And a lot of times the production ramps down pretty quickly well before turn 20. So anyway, that's a consideration. And it's not just for the Black Centaur, it's for all the things. The difference is if you go really low Dom strength, I'm talking like 1 Dom strength, you can keep population in your capital for a very long time and in all your lands. And that means you can recruit all these things. You could even recruit Black Centaur, but you could only get 1 per turn. So if you're doing that, it doesn't make sense to invest in much of a bless for them. Instead, you're probably just going to make your normal scales troops. And that brings us to the Centaur Warriors, who are actually really good. They have Berserker 3, so they're going to get a nice hefty bonus 3 natural protection here. They have pretty good stats. They have good base defense. They have good hit points. They have decent armor. They've got 2 attacks that are both going to scale well with Berserk. They're just a very solid unit. By no means are these guys like invincible. But they're certainly capable of going toe-to-toe with indies, and they're also capable, especially with buffs, of going toe-to-toe with player armies. They're a very high-quality troop. Now, there's certain types of things, of course, that they're not going to do great against, but, you know, that's like many things in Dominions. So anyway, it's a very solid, well-rounded base troop that is very effective. High mobility, decent defense package, but pretty aggressive. It's got a great offensive capability because it's going to get bonus attack when it berserks and bonus damage. This is a great unit, and these you can get with a low Dominion build. I think the archers and stuff are probably more trash. I mean, longbows are okay, and you know, if I had a stack of 100 of these, I would probably use them rather than get them killed off to free up upkeep. But I think I'd rather have Centaur Warriors. And the upkeep on these guys is pretty significant. But I could imagine situations where having 100 longbows would be really nice. I just don't think I want to pay 25 gold, especially on a gold-starved nation that has such good alternatives to spend gold on. So in my opinion, these units are pretty much always a pass. And the satyrs are also pretty solid. They have the satyr sneak, which causes unrest. I think you start with some of these, but maybe that changed. There's little FU in your capital. Let's start you off with some unrest. But yeah, I mean, pretty much all the satyrs, in sufficient quantity, they can raid. I think the other troops are pretty much better, and you want to make them most of the time. Maybe there's scenarios where you want to make satyr sneaks over Centaur Warriors, but I can't really think of what they'd be. Yeah, and harpies, these can be pretty mobile siege strength. You know, they're very cheap at 7 gold, and they put out a fair amount of siege strength, and so you can have them pop a fort, and then fly away. They can also patrol stuff out reasonably well, but they kind of aren't really great in combat. Maybe there's some buffs you could put on them that would make them do better. Like if you got weapons of sharpness or something on them, you know, I'm sure they could kill things. They are annoying, and whenever you're fighting Pangea, and I think also fighting Asphodel, let's see what we get in our capital. Yeah, you get some harpies. Anytime you're attacking a fort that has harpies on it, it makes it way harder to thug. A lot of times it doesn't feel good spending money to make your own harpies for like your armies because they're going to jump in and die every single engagement. So that doesn't feel good. But as part of PD, harpies feel really good because they really fuck up plans. They can snipe enemy mages. They can jump on thugs before they buff. They can do just so many different things that are going to really interrupt your opponent. So they're great at that. I think we've covered now pretty much all the units. The Black Minotaurs. So they get Berserk 5 as well. So the thing is they trample. Anything smaller than them, they're going to trample, and they're size 4. But things bigger than them, like cavalry, they're not going to try to trample. Instead, they're going to hit it with their bronze battle axe, which does a tremendous amount of damage. And if they're berserked, it's going to do even more. I think it's going to do like 6 or 7 more damage, like close to 40 damage if berserk. That's going to cut through shields. It's going to cut through everything. It's going to do just a ton of damage. So these are definitely another thing you can make if you need to kill gods, if you need to kill thugs. These guys, especially if you've got, some kind of bless that would help them as well. These guys are very good elite killers. In terms of trampling, it kind of is rough. They tend to fatigue out pretty fast, but I don't know, in sufficient quantities with a maybe more defensive-oriented bless, I could see them being good and you expanding with them. So that could totally be a thing. Yeah. So that's the Black Minotaur. This is new to Dominion 6 as well. It wasn't in Dominion 6 at launch, but it got added in one of the recent patches, so that's really cool. I think we've talked about kind of the basics of the units. I think basically you have a couple options here. Well, I will talk about this at Grand Strategy later, but you can lean into the Scales units, which in my opinion is mostly the Centaur Warriors, or you can lean into the Sacreds, which I think you could take your pick of either of these, just depending on which is better with whatever bless you want to run with. The Black Centaur is probably a better all-purpose Sacred, but I could see the Minotaur being really ferocious as well. So yeah, that's that. Now we're going to talk about the free spawn. And I've done a bunch of tests, and I'll tell you what I did. I built some forts, sometimes no forts, and either a place with a forest or without a forest. Sometimes I had a lab, sometimes I didn't, sometimes I had a temple, sometimes I didn't. We preached it up to 10 candles. We let the population die because dead corpses in a province will actually increase the reanimation for a few turns. So we let all that kind of trickle out, and then we hit intern 20 times, and we recorded how many of each type of thing there were, right? So I broke them up into all the categories. What I'm doing, by the way, is alt-clicking on them, and that selects all the units of a certain type. And we basically broke it up into how much chaff do we have, how many sacreds do we have, and how many elites. And things that we're calling elite are like the Minotaurs. This is an elite. The elephants are an elite. The bears are an elite. And I think that's it. So yeah, and then we count how many there are. We did 20 turns of it. And I'll pull up the spreadsheet now and show you. Okay, so this is the spreadsheet. Here we tested it with neutral scales. It's actually really hard to go like death when you have a 2 growth bias as Asphodel. And you also, with the 1 magic bias, you could only go, I think, drain 1 or something. So this is neutral scales, which is about as bad as you can tank growth and magic. And in that, we still had, so this is a forest with a temple. We had a pretty good sacred production. The fact that we didn't have any growth or magic didn't really impact sacred production much. It also could be that growth is more impactful at low dominion, because these are also 10 dominion in the province. But like if the formula, which I think it may be, is something like how many candles you have plus how much your growth is, then if your candles are really small, like if your candles are like 2 and your growth is somewhere between like 0 and 10, right? And I think in our case, for neutral, that would be like 5, right? So that would be, 7 total. But then if we're up at like 10 plus 5 equals 15, right? So if we're up at 10 candles, the 5 is a much smaller portion of it, such that if we were to do a different thought experiment, where in this case, if we go from, we're still at 2 candles, but now we go up to growth 3 instead of neutral, I believe that will put us up at 8. Because I know it's weird, growth 3 is 8, but you're counting from -5, basically. You're counting from 5 death, which is what 0 is. So it's 0, and then, 1 is 4 death, etc. I think that's how the counting works. But anyway, this would be equal to 10. And then if we were to go up, this would be, 10 plus 8 equals 18. Anyway, point is, if you're in this bottom row, if you have 10 candles, the difference between a little bit of growth is not very much, right? We're going from 15 to 18. This isn't a huge percentage increase. Anyway, I don't actually know what the math is. There's some pretty complicated IlWiki articles on it. I tried reading it and I was like, my head hurts. I'm just going to do these tests and we'll explain it that way. Because the thing is, too, you can understand the mechanics really well, but these tests often, I think, really just suss out what's important and what's not, even if they're not 100%, accurate. They're accurate, because there's randomness and all these things involved in the tests. They give you, especially when you've done it for like 20 turns, and a lot of these I ran multiple times as well, they give you a pretty good sense of kind of what to expect. So anyway, neutral scales, you're still going to get a ton of sacreds. You get 28 sacreds a turn. Or not a turn, this is for 20 turns. Sorry, not a turn. So yeah, it's like a sacred and a half a turn. And this is without magic, without growth. And you get a lot of chaff, but you get no elites, right? So you're getting no Minotaur, no elephants, no bears, no mandragoras. I'm sure you probably statistically get some, but we didn't get any in all the 20 turns. If you max out growth, so this is a growth 4 build, you get basically the same amount. That was one of the things I found really surprising. You don't get a lot more. The sacreds, this is probably noise. It's probably about the same amount of sacreds. We did get a few elites, which is interesting. If we had magic, but no growth, so this would be magic 3, but growth 0, or, neutral growth, we got, you can see a fair amount of elites here as well. This is probably kind of weird statistical fluctuation. You would expect a lot more elites than growth only, because that's the thing magic is supposed to impact, but you can see it didn't really change much. When we had growth and magic, you can see we got a fair bit more elites. And this really matters. It doesn't look like much. You're like, oh, you get basically the same totals. The elites really do matter a lot for your army comp. Like, they really are. Like, an army without any elites really will struggle to kill stuff. So the elites really do matter. So growth and magic, we got like a little bit more sacreds, but this again is probably all noise. The thing that is not noise is that you do get a fair, noticeably more elites. So that's significant. If you don't, so all these are with forests though, and this last one was growth 4 magic 3. Then I did another experiment with growth 3, not growth 4. The reason was because I didn't want to have, if I did growth 4, things would turn into forests, and this was a test of no forests. So I just wanted to see, how does this affect, like, if you don't have growth, if you don't have forests, how much does that affect things? I think we might have also had magic scales there as well. I'd have to go back and double check that. But yeah, without forests, we weren't getting any sacreds. So that was kind of interesting. The sacred production really does hinge on having forests. We still got some elites though. But if I recall, you do get a lot more elites than forests, even though this number does seem very high. I kind of maybe need to go back and revisit this particular test. Another thing I do remember, though, is we did priest reanimation, right? So this is, the way we would do this is you get a centaur, one of these guys, the centaur, carrion centaur, and you have them reanimate. And I had, I think, 20 of them reanimate, and did that for 20 turns, and then divided whatever the result was by 25 of them reanimate. And then I divided the totals by 25 to get how much does one carrion centaur reanimate over the course of 20 turns. And that's what these rates are. So you can compare these to these, because this is how much one forest does over 20 turns. This is basically how much one carrion centaur reanimates over 20 turns. Yeah. So the interesting thing is, you get, as a percent, you can see we were getting about 17% of our units were sacreds here. But for the priest reanimation, only about 2% were. So we get far fewer sacreds, but we actually get very high elite numbers. We get like 10% of our guys were getting our elite. So that was pretty significant. And like I don't know, I just tended to notice I got a lot of elephants with the priest reanimation. So if you do the priest reanimation, a way to think about it, you're not going to get a lot of sacreds, though you'll get some. And the sacreds you get, it may be a bug. They may fix this. But you don't get any of the carrion furies. You only get the Sagittarian carcasses for the sacreds. So that may be a bug. But yeah, you get a fair number of the elites, including like the elephants, which is really good. So if you go, and this does the priest reanimation has nothing to do with your scales at all. So, at least I don't think so.
So you can just reanimate. Doesn't matter what scales you took. Doesn't matter how many candles you're standing in that I could find. It's possible. Take it with the things I'm saying with a bit of a grain of salt, because I haven't tested all the permutations of everything. But my understanding is it's not affected by the Dominion or by the candles. Could be wrong though. But if you're going a low Dominion build, like you're only going Dominion Strength 1, you're not going to have a lot of candles in your provinces, which means you're not going to have these kind of spawn rates. But your priest will still work fine at reanimating. So that's an option you can consider. Now, where does this all land us for the nation? If we go kind of zoom out to the big picture view. In my opinion, you have two broadly very different ways you can take the nation. One way is you take a Hellbless. You say, we don't need scales. You may choose to have growth and magic. Though, as you can see, they didn't have... I think you do want forests, right? So growth 4, even though it has, in some ways, the least effect on spawn rates, the fact that it gives you forests is a really big deal. So I think you want growth 4. But you can tank pretty much any other scale you want. You put all the points into having a good bless. You go high Dominion, so you can make a ton of black centaurs. You make a ton of black centaurs. With a good bless, you run at one of your neighbors and you kill them. And if you do that, your land in that time will have gone to shit, right? Because your high Dominion, it's going to do spreading places. You're going to have all your population die off. You're not going to be making any money, but you have a new capital and some new land. And if you're smart about it and you don't preach over there and you don't build temples, that land may be free of your Dominion for quite some time. So if you manage to pull that off, you can have a decent gold income, because you need that gold to make mages. You don't get free spawn mages, right? You have to spend gold to get mages, to get research. And if you don't research, you're not going to be winning any games, I don't think. And as that happens, right, you're going to be losing production of your Black Centaur. You're only going to be making these in high quantities, maybe the first 15 turns. And then after that, it's going to be a very quick downhill slope. In fact, it'll start probably... You probably won't be able to max out Centaur production for more than 10 turns if you have high Dominion, unless you have some good plan for actually keeping your Dominion out of your capital, which, good luck with that. But anyway, as your population dies off and you can no longer recruit either Black Centaurs or Black Minotaurs, you will be getting a lot of free spawn. And that free spawn will include things like Carrion Furies, which are really good and probably would like the same kind of bless you're going to give the Black Centaurs and the Black Minotaurs. And so you can switch from having, 7 or 8 or even maybe 9 a turn of your sacreds out of your capital to getting, maybe 1 or 2 Carrion Furies out of your capital a turn. But you're not just getting them out of your capital. You're starting to get, maybe 1 Carrion Fury a turn out of some of your forests nearby. And as you get those forests built up, maybe you have like 6 or 7 forests with temples in them. Maybe you're getting, 6 or 7, 8 maybe Carrion Furies out of those forests, but you're also getting a ton of free spawn. So you're making up for the fact that now you're only getting 1 or 2 Black Centaur or Black Minotaur out of your capital. You're only getting a couple of them, but you're making up for it with all the free spawn. So you can go through this transition where you're no longer able to recruit the Pangea units, and you're kind of going into the cycle of death and rebirth with Asphodel, and you're starting to get some of the, free spawn sacreds. That's one way to play it. And I think that's the way Illwinter intends for you to play the nation. And I think that's I think they fixed it now where that is a cool way to play. However, I don't think it's the best way to play, because I think money is really important. Having money is really good. Having your population die off is really bad. And I know I like playing a lot of pop kill nations, but yeah, having your population, you need really strong things to counteract the effect that you're killing all your population, because population and gold are really good. I think the best way to play this nation, and this is like the complete opposite in a way, is you only go 1 Dominion. So you can't hardly make any sacreds because your sacreds are limited by how much your max dom strength is, right? You go 1 Dominion, and instead you play like Scales Pangea. You make the Centaur Warriors. You make a lot of mages, right? But here's the thing. You can preach. So in your forests, you build labs and temples. You put carrion fortresses there. You start recruiting your dryads. Your dryads can preach in a temple, even though you have 1 dom strength. So if you have 1 dom strength, you're never, by normal temple checks, going to have more than 1 candle in any province. That means you're going to have 1 pop kill, 1% pop kill a turn, but you have growth 4, so you're going to counteract that, and it's going to be effectively like basically 0 pop kill. But even though you have 1 dom strength, you can preach above your dominion strength. So a dryad can preach up to 5 candles in a temple because she's holy 2, and the temple gives her 1 extra candle she can preach to. So you could have 5 candles in your forests, which are the places that generate your best free spawn. So you can do that, and you can kind of get both worlds. You can get good free spawn, including sacreds, from your forests. And then your high income land, you let that stay at 1 candle and you keep drawing a really good income from it. And at some point, as you desire, you can start building more temples. And once you build more than 5, you're going to now start having a bit more pop kill. You're going to go from having 1%, basically 0% pop kill a turn because you only had 1 candle that gets counteracted by growth, to now you got 1% pop kill a turn. That is a lot slower than a build that has like 10% pop kill a turn, right? So you can build a few more temples after that. Maybe you get up to 2% pop kill a turn, but now you've got like a ton of temples. You can also keep it at truly just, only build 4 temples the whole game and just have a ton of money. The mage, your main workhorse mage, doesn't need a temple. So anyway, that's another way to play, is you basically play Scales Pangea. You have to preach to manage your dominion. You can also specifically preach in provinces, especially forests, to get your dominion high. So like low-income provinces, you can try to turn them into a forest, preach in them, get your dominion in there. It'll turn into a forest. Then you build a lab and a temple, start getting decent quality free spawn in there. And that may be a better use of that particular low-income province than having kept it as like some shoddy plains or something. But meanwhile, like your really juicy farmlands and things like that, you don't touch those. You let those stay just how they are. And then you're going to be having a ton of money. You're going to be having a lot of research. You've got really good recruit anywhere mages. And you've still got a lot of free spawn, because not only, while you're not going to have as much as the other build, you're going to be having also, free spawn from your priests that are reanimating. Though speaking of that, one of the problems with the low dominion build is you're going to be missing out on a fair number of nature gems. Because you're capped at 1 dom strength, you're only going to be getting 1 nature gem per turn from your temples. But the other high dominion build is going to be getting a lot of gems from temples. So, that's an argument to push you in that direction too. There's also another thing I should mention. Forts protect 1,000 population. So if you build a fort, it'll keep the population from going to 0 from your dominion, right? Other things like spells and stuff can still kill off the population beneath that, but the forts will protect you from 1,000, the last 1,000 people will be protected. Now that's not much. 1,000 population, that province is pretty toast. It's not going to let you make Black Centaur, White Centaur, Black Centaur, or Black Minotaur for very long. But, it's the tiniest of silver linings. Yeah, the other thing I should mention is that the changes to the way life after death works means that when you get switched to a dead mage or whatever, you become a twice-born version of whatever commander died. So if your commanders die, their twice-born versions have recuperation built into the chassis. They're going to turn into like the Carrion Lord, the Carrion Lady. Right now it's a bug, I think, in the game, but the Centaurs also turn into Carrion Ladies. Anyhow, they have recuperation. And one of the things that happens when you get life after death now is you get turned into the twice-born form, which is way better than the old soulless form. But you get, feeble-minded and mute and all these horrible afflictions. But because the things you turn into, and this is kind of like an Asphodel special, because the thing you turn into has recuperation built into the chassis, you just get rid of it. So it'll take a while because feeble-minded and mute are, conditions that take a long time to fix. But you can basically like wholesale convert your mage core into the twice-born form, which is a far superior form for most of them. And you get rid of the upkeep. So that's another thing that Asphodel can take advantage of in this new Dominion 6 format that makes them potentially quite formidable. We'll talk a little bit more about like the spells that can be cast here. I realize I haven't really talked about that, but like these guys can do Foul Vapors. They can do Serpent's Blessing. They can do Mass Regen. With boots, Earth Boots, you can get up to Earth 3. If you can figure out a way to get a Bloodstone, you can do the big Earth buffs, like Army of Gold and stuff. For Death, you can do Rigor Mortis, Darkness, Life After Death. These are all really good things. Probably some more stuff too I'm forgetting. And then Nature, you get Mass Regen, Oaken Army, which is like Mass Protection from Dominions 5. Relief, Serpent's Blessing, Army of Giant. Yeah, so there's a lot of things you can do with these spells. You can also do things like Grip of Winter with your water randoms, if you get 2 boosters on them. So yeah, a lot of options. Another thing of note is your undead, unlike in Dominions 5, actually have a bit of cold resistance. They've got cold resistance 5 now, which is new. So that's also kind of cool. There's some national items which I should just cover. They're not terribly good. I have to research them real quick. But some of them I think are kind of bugged, but and they technically work. One of them is this, the Carrion Seed. And you put this on a person, they're going to get diseased, and they're going to very, very, very slowly die. Okay, I cannot emphasize how slow this is. It might be, I haven't tried it. Somebody suggested in the comments of one of the patch videos I did that you can try drowning them. And it might be if you drown them, that will qualify for a Carrion Seed kill. You can't suicide them. It's not like Twiceborn where you can send them into an enemy province to die. But it might be, not sure, if they die from drowning in a friendly province, maybe they come back. But if you have to wait for disease to kill them, guys, I'm telling you, it's like 15 to 20 turns. It takes forever. Okay? But anyway, eventually they'll die from the disease. And when that happens, they come back as a mindless mannequin. This is one of the very few ways with the Life After Death changes to get a mindless commander, aside from like a golem. So that's really important with like Astral Corruption and Cataclysm and some late game stuff. So that's a cool option to have, but I think it's super niche right now. You can also, this item can be picked up on death, or at least it could the last time I checked. So you could also put this on an enemy commander and it's cursed. So if you get this in them, they're going to come, Pretenders might not be able to transform, so I'm not sure if they would come back, but it will kill them at least. But you could put this on some other, high value enemy commander and they're going to slowly die. That doesn't seem like a great use of 10 gems to me though either. Asphodel also gets access to a pretty cool bow, the Carrion Bow, and this is like the Sagittarian Carcass that gets a bow that's going to give the Carrion Seed debuff that's going to give you permanent undead if you kill somebody with it. So, that's kind of cool, but probably overpriced. Yeah, I think we've covered most of the things. There's probably a spell or two that I haven't covered. Carrion Fortress, how you make forts. Dark Slumber is an event that will cause a remote attack. That's kind of cool. There used to be a way to bug trap army, like you could trap armies in forts where they never got to fight. I think they fixed that, so you can't do that anymore. I think that was the only good use of that spell, but yeah, I think that's it. There's probably a few more national item discounts and stuff, but I think we've covered the main things. And I think we've covered kind of the broad strategy, which is... The other thing I probably didn't hit on enough is just how good the thugs are. If you stack these guys in the same tile, you can have like really, really top-end thugs. I haven't shown examples of it, and I don't know how much it's going to come up in the single-player game, because honestly, the AI armies are a little tricky to thug. But yeah, we'll see. And I know that's a stupid thing to say, but it's actually happened to me in quite a few games where I've lost a lot of thugs. But yeah, anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the national overview. Hope you're looking forward to seeing me play Asphodel in single player, or hope you're looking forward to playing Asphodel in your own multiplayer game. So with that, I think we'll end it, and I hope you've enjoyed, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.